I kicked the day off talking about NFC and RFID harvesting for, like, you know, whatever. We've been working on this stuff now for the better part of 2 years, experimenting in labs and suckering folks in around the office to start mucking with different aspects of specifically NFC more than RFID, but there's just been so much stuff, so many new kinds of vulnerabilities have been showing up lately that it's been, you know, keeping up a lot of us up at night for a lot of different reasons. And for me, one of the biggest things I find is, and this is a perfect example of a conference where this is the big issue. I look back to, pick on like DEF CON 1 and 2, the beginning of BSides. We always talk about control failures, you know, the vulnerabilities and what goes on. Yet, no one seems to fucking care, right? We keep on identifying them, keep on identifying methodologies to identify them in a corporate environment so people can learn from it. Yet, we keep on having the same problems again and again and again. So, why bother looking? Opinions? Why do we bother looking for vulnerabilities? Anyone? To get paid, because it's fun. That's all you need, really. It's not going to get you laid very often, I'll tell you that much. But, okay, so, you know, I find for me, I sort of had a huge struggle trying to, you know, really justify why the hell we spend all this time, all this effort in finding issues, and then people keep on going around them. And then I realized that it's truly not about the vulnerability from a corporate perspective. It's about understanding the exploit from the human perspective. And there's a gentleman named Joe Waller, who, technical guy, artist guy. Has anyone heard the name before? He was on the speaking circuit a little while ago because he embedded himself with an RFID chip for fun. Cut open in a hand, stuck in an animal-grade RFID chip so he could go keyless. Cool. Interesting. Not what legally the commercial folks intended at the time, right? They had all this fancy legal work. Well, we're not going to put it in humans. Don't worry. This is for animals and this and this, this. And then somebody goes ahead and does it. It gets media, it gets attention. Then all of a sudden a company says, well, shit, if people want that, we can go crazy. And there's a company online now that literally builds, you can't see the scale here, but they're the smallest RFID chips they're putting together now are literally, they're about 1/8 of the size of the head of a penny. And they're going into concepts like, well, you know, we could start tracking people and their patterns by literally, like, you know, sprinkling these on the sidewalk, letting people's shoes pick them up, and then track them. We could do this in, you know, protected areas of our facilities to see who went where they shouldn't, or, you know, track patterns in the shopping mall, or. And it was amazing how, you know, one person's little innovation from an artistic, from a creative perspective, sort of blew the doors open from a corporate perspective and all these new implementations that we really hadn't initially considered. And we definitely really had never secured that technology to be used in that way. So, you know, that's when I look at it, that's really why we're here. It's trying to remind folks that even though you can, probably you shouldn't. And if you're going to, there's probably a better way, and there's probably opinions, specifically around privacy, that you should consider. And that's sort of a scope I wanted to put on it. Like, you know, a lot of folks talk about things like BSides and say, well, why are practitioners talking to the public? And that's the most important part. If folks out here, you know, again, it's going to be you guys creating things from, you know, it's going to be you guys having an opinion about what needs to be done in the future. And it's not security folks that are going to change the world, it's everyone else. So anyhow, off my soapbox. So RFID and NFC. So anyone have a background in RFID, technically? No? I got one guy, for sure. A couple of guys around the office have been suckered into it. So what's the difference between RFID and NFC? Does anyone know? One's built on the other. RFID, there's a spectrum range here. Apologize, I can't see squat. But It starts from a low frequency. We have some high frequency stuff, ultra high, super high. And NFC is just a subset of an RFID implementation, more explicit. When we look at some of the different options out there, like some of my low frequency stuff, that's where the animal tags, what Joe put in and what, fell under. You have item tracking, the high frequency, that's where NFC is. It's a type of high frequency implementation. Then you have ultra high, your box, pallet stuff, and then other types of industrial tagging in the active category, which can get to like 2 to 5 gig nowadays. And that's it. They have a battery, they can talk themselves. And so it's when we talk about RFID and NFC, it's not just one kind of implementation. There's literally several dozen implementations, all with different power requirements, antenna and loop size requirements, data structure differences. I'll get into a couple very briefly. But it's not just one clean thing. For NFC, it's the same thing. We have our active and passive. So our passives actually get powered from the device. And in my little diagram here, I show cell phones. But that's, when it was originally conceived, the cell phone implementation really had not been thought of. And so there's a lot of stuff in it just from a general RFID standard that, were not inherently meant to be secure when anyone could modify the entire workflow, I'll call it that. And I'll show it right towards the end of the slides. But for NFC, even for its specific implementation, we have A, B, and F that are the standards right now. Most people follow, but it's still a work in progress. Most of the new stuff we're getting is NFC F, and the reason why is that NFC A and B, depending on if it's polling or listening, it has a subcarrier in the 848 kilohertz range. So it's not just one clean signal. NFC F gets it back. There's no subcarrier now. It's nice and these were clean. But really what it means is it's easier to certify and license in different countries. So hence the motivation going down that road, removing a subcarrier. Again, many, many flavors. So looking at RFID first, what are some of the major issues that people have, and where are the concerns coming from? Okay, so who has an RFID device on them right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, just over half the folks. Why do you use it? Why do you have it on you right now?
Bank card.
Bank card? Okay. Pardon me? Passport? Oh, shit. Court order. Okay. Identification. And that's kind of the spookiest thing. Some access control, right? I got a couple access controls on me, I think, here, hopefully. Yeah. But really, I find that's the most interesting immediate issue is when we look at identity, zoom back 10 years ago, that's not what RFID was designed for. There's a really cool set of papers to check out. Karsten and Henrik Plotz, they have I'll call it the default, the seminal work on RFID security. And they break out all the standard attacks that the general RFID spectrum is exposed to, and then was really the basis for a lot of the stuff that we have to deal with in NFC. So first one really I want to talk briefly about is proxy and relay attacks. Has anyone heard of NFC proxy? I know Leaf has somewhere in the back wherever he is. There you go. NFC proxy, yes, no? Take a Samsung cell phone, any sort of Android device, can read the NFC device, and then replay it across Wi-Fi to another device, and then poop it out to the NFC reader. So really good for stealing credit cards, in theory. But that's exactly what they implemented it for, was to prove that I could simply take from my credit card, read my one-time pad from the CVV, send it somewhere else, do a transaction. So the whole point of being in close range, having to be within the 3 inches, which we're going to get into a lot, is totally pointless. Now, this is probably I'll call it the most standard attack now, is people are building proxies for any form of RFID. And now, if we just widen that and said, like, we have this really cool Android implementation to work with and to show demos with, But literally, you can do that with any RFID implementation for identity, for access control, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm surprised we haven't had more movie premises on this already. But the attacks work in the same, work in a very simplistic way, and I'll get into some of the, from a code perspective in a little bit here. But really what it came down to is that the cell phone implementations were never considered early on. It was always going to be a static reader in the original design. So what I've been getting into lately now is, again, in the standard, they never really thought of emulation and spoofing as something we'd want to do. So I have my NFC on my credit card. It's supposed to be a one-off card, so again, I can't copy it or emulate it. But the moment people got access to the technology, said, well, why the hell am I carrying 35 NFC cards in my wallet? So then what's been slowly starting to happen, this was actually, again, from October this year, so Google's decided to actually add in host card emulation right into the OS. So what does that mean? With cards that are, I'll call them, protected in a small manner, like rewards cards, my HID prox cards, like some of the basic stuff, I can actually use the NFC reader on my phone to collect, store, and then actually just emulate again and again and again. With a little bit of mucking around, you can get them to create, again, back to the CVV and the one-time pads on a credit card, we'll very easily be able to, again, copy somebody's credit card, emulate it off the phone, and then generate a pad that's either correct, based on a little bit of work, or something that is correct enough that'll allow the transaction to immediately occur. And that's just because of, to simplify, where is the CVV being checked in the credit card world? Is it being checked locally, local server, centrally, or has clearing occurred? There's going to be a lot of ways for folks to actually end up stealing a credit card and generating new fakes using entirely emulated equipment. More simplistically, you go on Alibaba right now. This is a little basic, old school RFID cloner. Click to read, click to write, and that will copy and the original HID prox card 1 access control cards. Still used in about, well, in North America, I'll be used in about 20% of the implementations for access controls. And you look in Asia, it's used for almost half still. So replay, it's a little bit way easier than emulation, but it's becoming a way simpler problem for folks to deal with. So from the little readers here, what are some of the different implementations that we have today, or they're going to be coming out, that are going to use standard RFID, or being able to copy or do a replay attack that quickly, that will be a problem? Any ideas? Yeah, hotel rooms, conference IDs. How about from a privacy perspective? What should those implementations would scare you the most? Passport. Thankfully, Passport's got a little bit of encryption to it. It can't use this dummy device, but that's not what people are implementing. So a Passport, any idea on it, like manufacturing cost? So a couple, well, depends on who you're buying it from, I guess. But it's about $450,000 to $500,000 to work with one of the firms to develop everything out, build your hardware, get your implementations, print your cards. It's something that we're not doing for a conference. But the technologies we're having right now, my favorite is stores are going away from UPC codes, which are horribly vulnerable, to RFID. And why are UPC codes horribly vulnerable? What's the attack people are doing out there? Yeah, instead of $100, making it $1 and walking out the door. And because I scanned it, it must be on sale. Doi. So we're moving to NFC, using this style of NFC. Very basic, very cheap. I can print them on a card, and they're literally hundredths of a cent per piece. And they're expecting it to change their problem as a commercial entity. Not at all. What's worse is it's even harder to detect, because at least when somebody tapes over, you can have somebody at the teller look and say, well, is this the original code or not? If I've seen this box 36,000 times in the last year, does this look normal? And now it will be the original tag on the box with a different price code in it, with a different inventory item in it, and you won't be able to detect it immediately. So new technology has actually made the old problem worse. The other one we're seeing a lot right now with not a lot of evidence of exactly what attacks are going on has been the algebraic replay attacks. And has anyone heard of key lock? Yeah. Got one person nodding their head. Yes, no? What does key lock do? Cars. So there was a clip on CBC, I guess, 2 weeks ago, regarding some folks that were breaking into cars, and they had some sort of device in their hands. Anyone see that? Yes, no? Okay. So the interesting challenge was we didn't get to see the real device that this individual had. And so there's a laundry list of stuff that could happen. And actually, after the clip was shown, I got like 6-7 dozen phone calls from people saying, well, we've been seeing this, but do you have a device and can you show us what it looks like? Had people saying, yeah, my car's totally been broken into, and this is exactly what must have happened. Can you tell so-and-so that this is what happened to me? But the interesting challenge is that when we looked at this video, there are a couple things that could have went on. And the first one was, the question posed was, can people open car doors without having a key? And the answer is absolutely. So the key lock attack replay vulnerability and the crypto vulnerability has been around for almost, I'll say 10 years, 9.5, 8, maybe 8. But essentially the standard key that they've based everything off of has been busted, and it's very easy to just basically create a replay attack for it. The problem is then, based on back on the paper here, it's the key lock is just one implementation of algorithm. Every car manufacturer has sort of taken that as a standard, and as they got into the 2000s, like 2005, 2007 model years, a lot of them made their own style of implementation with the exact same vulnerabilities. And now you can go on Alibaba and buy a replay attack that has their master manufacturer code in it, and then will either A, just chirp out the manufacturing code and hope the door unlocks. B, we'll have the manufacturing code, and then we'll just cycle through car codes until it gets one, and hope we can sit there for like 45 minutes, and eventually it will actually unlock the door, but could actually let you start the car after that then. Or there's other units that actually let you take the master code, and then once you get the car code, you input it in, and you can actually make your own emulated fob. So we sort of said, okay, well, there's a couple different options. So yeah, it could have been a key lock vulnerability. It could have been a slot jammer, which I'll get into at the end. It could have been a particular emulated fob, or the person could have forgotten to lock the door. Can't tell, we didn't have the device. But the challenge right now is that a lot of the existing implementations people have, they expect to be as secure as the day they implement them. So who's seen a HID proc system before? All right, they're pretty much bloody everywhere. Who's seen the cloning attack that was shown at DEF CON this year? There you go. 1, 2, 3. So the cool thing with this system, and pretty much RFID harvesting of any type, is there's a couple key steps we got to go through. The first thing is we need to identify what system's at play. And again, because we have a wide range of spectrum to deal with there, not all of our readers and our sniffers are going to be able to be in the right range. So we're going to have some way of identifying what type of RFID communication is going on. Once we know that, we got to grab the signal and see if is it actually encrypted or not. Is it vulnerable to a standard replay attack? And then once I got whatever I can, be it something that's encrypted, which I'm going to have to break and figure out how to replay and rebuild, or if it's something I can simply just emulate, then I can move on to actually doing an attack with it. The first thing in identification is just figuring out what signals at play. And there's a really cool set of dongles you can get online for the Ustream folks. And there's two little dongles that will actually let you see the entire spectrum from an RFID view. They're about $90 online. Stick it in, and you can actually listen to anything chirping in the area. It'll tell you, are you dealing with high frequency, low frequency? Does it have a subcarrier or not? And oddly enough, again, between, I got like 6 dozen different kinds of cards up here. It was very interesting to see that the implementation of subcarrier for NFC, it was sort of all over the map. It really did help to use a third-party device or something you've crafted yourself to identify what exactly was going on. And for the new implementations, I can see a lot of people starting to muck with different kinds of subcarrier implementation just to, instead of fixing the problem, avoid the published attack. So we use these things to actually on the range. And then for the HID proxy system, Bishop Fox, the guys who actually did the presentation, had a really kick-ass little implementation you can download from them and implement that will grab the information directly from it. It's Adreno-based. And this was the inside guts there. But they just took a standard HID proxy reader, the full-size proxy reader, gutted it, put the Adreno in there, battery-powered so they could carry it around for attack. And it would simply grab the values on the cards. So I have a Proxmark 3, which is what is going to be used in the next step. So the standard thing for cloning these HID cards. Why the heck was it so important, I guess for the guys who went to DEF CON, why did the Bishop Fox guys go out and develop this big-ass reader instead of just using Proxmark like everyone else has been doing for the last year or two? Why is bigger better? Range. Yeah. And that was the problem with the Proxmarks. You have these dumb little antennas, and you literally got to touch the guy's ass to get the code. So for pen testing, like it makes for a lot of awkward moments, right? And well, more awkward than usual. But the other challenge then is back to real world feasibility. You know, people started arguing, well, how common is it going to be that somebody's walking around just literally grabbing the antenna? And a lot of the NFC demos you'd see on TV, including mine, where people would ask you to demo, how do you steal the credit card? Well, here, it's like, well, I can, basically you put it up to the wallet, you wait 2 seconds, and finally it grabs. But it's not realistic, or is it? So what the Bishop Fox, what they're trying to do is improve was, as a pen tester, could we build a tool that anyone could use that could read from a couple of inches to a couple of feet away? And the answer is yeah, and very cheaply. Now, of course, just based on the presentation format we got today, there's a bunch of toys I wanted to show you. But the cool guy, Bishop Fox, awesome guys, open source, the code and the circuit board they do to make this reader, they've open sourced, and we've been cranking them out at AscentWorks down the street. So if anyone else wants to build one of these, we actually have all the working parts sitting here in Winnipeg for demos. And it's amazing at how well it works for pen testing. All right. So identified it. I grab it. The farther away I can grab it, the better. And then I use my Proxmark. Comes in a fancy kit nowadays. It's a commercial device. Woo! It's amazing how guys are getting paid nowadays. And then I literally just copy to a fresh card. Now the challenge is that when they first started, there was three different flavors of HID card, one of which was vulnerable. With all the folks that have been getting interested since August, like when Bishop sort of blew the doors off of this and made it accessible to everyone. Now, every flavor of HID Prox 2 and their competitors' variants, I have a 1K and a UL here, they're all vulnerable. So for enterprise access control systems, quite literally as much as 60% of the systems out there are vulnerable to this attack, and you can get your card read from a couple of inches to a couple of feet away without you knowing it. So even though what I've shown you is actually fairly non-technical, that's sort of what I wanted to show it, is that anyone in this room has already been exposed to this information. Anyone can put down their credit card and buy these devices, read it, execute. The root vulnerabilities that folks have been talking about for over a decade are still there, and we got to fix them. You know, the problem hasn't changed in a couple hundred years, but people's awareness and their confidence in these poorly designed systems has just gotten a little too high. All right. Oh, where's my... Fancy little video did. So credit card and wallet and pants, NFC proxy, awkwardly stick it to your pants for a while, brush around, and there we go. You can, if you're really good, like after practicing for a while, we got it down to one swift movement where we could prep everything, slide in, you know, touch the butt or touch the purse preferably, get a card number and walk away. But truly, NFC is why we're not going to be allowed to have nice things in the future. It's, again, all those tricks that are public, known, et cetera, from the standard RFID implementations are all now just that much easier in NFC. And people, there's a shit tons of hype around what's going on. And the first set of talk is all about grabbing at a distance. And over the summer, you know, the specific one that kept coming up is that I can grab something from 10 meters or more away. Did anyone ever see the demo or the demo video of this? No? Okay. Neither did I. Couldn't find it. There's very few resources out from a practitioner perspective about how bad is NFC, and from the different variants, you know, A versus F. Like again, when I use a subcarrier, can I sniff farther away? Can my loop be different? Like what are the aspects I need to worry about? So from a pen testing view, we started looking at what are the challenges we have to understand. And, you know, the first one is distance, and then really we got into covert action. So again, what is actually feasible and what kinds of attack patterns can be dealt with. And then we're going to talk about later on the management, so the quality of data and the manageability. But the first stuff, let's talk about distance first. In theory and in standard implementation, you know, a non-active, like a passive chip, we can read from about 3 to 4 inches. So we started by experimenting with our own antennas. We built a whole whack of different flavors and started to realize, you know, what works, what doesn't, and ultimately what was broken about our thought process. And there's a really awesome paper, Ian Kirschbaum and Avishai Wool. It's from '06, which is funny because nowadays it seems like everything if it isn't from last year, it's old. This stuff it's perfect stuff, amazing stuff, really good stuff. And it explains exactly from an RFID point of view, the basic standards, how to build circuits from scratch, and then more importantly, how to build a research and thought process of stretching the boundaries. How far can you go before you've deviated? Again, you've added something into the system you won't be able to troubleshoot your way out of. So how do tags get power? How does an RFID or an NFC tag get power? Anyone? Induction. So RFID can use backscatter, it can be capacitive or inductive, but NFC specifically is inductive coupling. So most people think of, you know, we have an iron core for induction. So there's the 2 windings, and now I'm just inducting power through. NFC is the exact same principle, just with an air core instead of an iron core. But why this is important is, not being an electrical engineer, when I heard the word antenna, I thought, look, bigger antenna, more power, more range. Done. 10 meters? Fuck yeah, that just buy me a big ass thing and it will work. No, it's induction. So, unfortunately, good old man physics gets in the way and says for induction to work, the coils need to be within 0.15 wavelengths of each other. So somebody else did the math for me. 13.56 megahertz. It's a wavelength of 22 meters. So if it has to be within the 0.15 wavelengths, we have a theoretical maximum of 3.3 meters. So lock yourself in a Faraday cage. Any loop, the maximum distance is going to be 3.3 meters. So that's not real world, but that's a cap. It ain't 10 meters. It ain't 100 meters. There's other pieces of the puzzle that have to be figured out. The other one, which was even more depressing, is I'm like, 3 meters, okay, well, that will make for good TV. But the moment you have to do any sort of two-way communication between the card and back to the reader, well, you have to half it. So what was 3 meters is barely 1.5 meters under optimum conditions. So that's why the standard reader, we're only getting a couple inches, because that's the real world. It's tough to really stretch those limits. And you have to isolate a lot of factors to get the induction to not only work, but then to get a good signal clean across it. And that's where we struggle. We spend a lot of time struggling on. Is just once we've got power to it, can we even get something clean out of it? So from an experimentation point of view, we started with our Omni smart card reader. This is a standard HID reader. And what's neat about it is all the different development software out there, this is the easiest starting point. Cheap reader, under 50 bucks, compatible with almost all the different types of code for vulnerability testing, for general signal testing. It's all out there. Then the other one we have here is this monstrosity. And this is the NXP evaluation board. And it has an antenna built on it. And you can see here we've jerry-rigged another one to it. But both of these boards had, after a lot of lessons learned, the biggest and largest amount of compatibility with everyone else's work out there. So standard reader, 2.5 inches of range. Not a heck of a lot. But what we found is, depending on where you put it, how you put it, and how you move the card around it, you could get a different signal range. So, like one perfect example is just from the way induction works. Is I can induct like this, or I can induct at a 90-degree angle. Any reason why? No? Magic? No. So magnetical fields are not uniform, and they're not directional in any sense of the word. So depending on, especially from the black box, you never know exactly how their coil is orientated and what's interfering with it. So they intend, hopefully, to optimize the induction from the front plate, but often you could actually turn it on the side axis and you get a much better induction from a side angle. And yeah, that's oversimplified to a great degree, but the whole point was when you're experimenting is a lot of the different kinds of implementations, even when they're optimized, still had different variability and what kind of range we could get. The moment we started mucking around with our own antennas, it got, the variety went even further. So with our eval board, we started with sort of we finished with a somewhat large-sized antenna here. Here it is. And the reason we sort of originally picked this was, we call it the sneaky loop. It was basically, it had decent range, about 4 inches. Totally not creepy at all. But you literally can get the rigs. The rig actually doesn't require a computer. You can battery power it. And you could sit there and walk around and get reasonably close to someone without having to touch their ass. So it's good, but not great. So then we went one further, and we built the monster loop. So unfortunately, we couldn't really figure out a good way of concealing this. Maybe behind a sign. I don't know. Either way, right, you're not getting very far with this. And then from here, like, trying to go bigger, you start looking at, okay, well, it's going to be a fixed point attack if I do this, right? Literally, like, there's going to be a barn door somewhere is where I'm going to have to put a coil in to squeeze out that extra half an inch. So that's what I found was probably the most surprising, was when we started looking at the antennas and again and realizing finally from a physics standpoint what we're dealing with, and then implementations in the real world what we're dealing with. You can barely see here, but under all the different flavors of antenna we started mucking with, really you got to about a foot of distance and you weren't getting anything after that. So again, really from our optimum signal power down to our coil, we actually hit the theoretical maximum very quickly. All right, so I'm going to try turning this on here. On. Find my credit card. Okay. So under optimum conditions, we're getting not quite 6 inches. I can read the card from about okay, I can read the card from about there, but I'm not getting any data quality. So, long story short, long-range NFC harvesting is a fallacy. You can't just build a big loop and scoop numbers without looking like an idiot. But harvesting them is actually a very quick, very easy thing to do from a pen testing point of view. And we start looking at the emulation that's going on. That's when the really interesting fun stuff starts to happen. So it is a fallacy, but not entirely. See, there's these guys, Ernest and Clemens. They created a very, very awesome to read paper on how exactly you do the eavesdropping. So once a card's active and it's actually chattering back and forth, you can pick up that with a directional antenna and get access to the signal. So instead of doing the induction, just hope the induction's already occurring. So fixed point attack on a payment terminal, fixed point attack on a restaurant terminal, whatever form, you actually can get some significant distance. And that's what we're working on right now. We sort of based off of their rig and their papers, started looking at, from that theoretical maximum of 10 meters, what rigs from a pen tester point of view are actually valid, and then trying to figure out what's that, I'll call it that, that range of susceptibility, that when I look, you do a pen test for the bank, for a restaurant, whomever, well, where shouldn't antennas be able to be placed, right? Where shouldn't somebody be hanging out? So it definitely is possible, but it's not powering it, it's scooping it, and there's tons of quality data and manageability issues. And folks have been working on this for some time, but what's really interesting right now, I find, is that it's going to change the way we think about the emulators. Again, the next generation of phone that I do my cardless wallet, and I have my 4 or 5 payment options on here. Now, that zone of susceptibility, I become very paranoid about. Like, can somebody bring the payment terminal to my spot, my seat, whatever? Because that sniffing will just be, probably be a very critical aspect of pulling out information from a pen test view. So, do we use the same attacking and assessment approach when we're dealing with NFC versus RFID? And as we started working on it, the physical elements are the same. We can identify, grab, and clone. And really, identification to zooming in. Is it an A implementation versus an F implementation? And what's that zone of susceptibility? But then along came Charlie Miller. I'm not sure anyone's heard of this gentleman before. Works for Trustwave right now, I believe. but he did a really cool paper on where exactly the real attack surface is for NFC. So on the phone, I have my NFC controller. I talk to my application processor and then my universal subscriber identity module, my USIM. And there's a whole whack of application-based issues with NFC right now. So the stack itself has a lot of different bugs in the implementation. And when he did the paper, he didn't find any specific ones that allowed for control or any sort of escalated privileges, but tons that were denial of service related, tons of that impacted data integrity on the phone, specifically impacting the SIM. So being able to erase somebody's phone via an invalid request. There's forced, actually he did find some forced Android browser exploits. So literally, like again, the phone, if it was allowed to accept a page accept immediately and auto execute a page, there's tons of different exploits you could do there. And then lots of pairing issues. And most of these, where we started mucking around with, are going to be on the third-party devices I get from, again, from Alibaba or Deal Extreme, where it's just a cheap knockoff device. It has auto pairing, and there's tons of different content sharing attacks in those custom devices. Expanding it out one step further, I start looking at my mobile network operators and the footprint with them. The NFC integrated applications people are working on, it goes way beyond physical implementation, into how the service providers deal with it, how the SIM card and the data on that gets handled. So there's a lot of places from a pen testing perspective we can look way beyond that direct first-time implementation. So it was an interesting view. Like I find as we move forward with building out the approach to pen testing on the NFC road, it's going to actually probably focus more on the software, directly on the phone, and then finally on the explicit implementation, look for that zone of susceptibility and determine what's in scope or out. All right. Last but not least, what was probably the most disappointing thing as we went through all of this is how hard it was to really get good, clean signals all the time. And in my wallet, I have, at no less at any particular time do I have like 5 or 6 of the NFCs. I only have one that works still. Has anyone ever actually checked to see how many of their NFC cards are working? Yes, no, anyone? Should give it a shot. I was really surprised at how easy they break and how often you don't realize that. So how would you break NFC in your credit card if you don't want it? Microwave? What power setting? Any? Yeah, I'll take 1 over 10. It's a pain. You'll probably kill the mag stripe at the same time, right? Totally possible. But again, what if I want to try keeping? I want to keep the stripe. I want to keep the old school plug-in chip, but I want to get rid of my. This is there, hanging out there. Scissors. Punch. Yeah. That's your guy's solution for everything. All right. Yes. Of course, that was a colon answer. Absolutely. that if you can surgically remove it, and there's YouTube's full of some beautiful surgical removal approaches that work well. But all the foil and all that crap people have been talking about, honestly, it's just stacking multiple cards works better than buying a $100 wallet with aluminum foil in it. The last but not least, which I've had very good success with in the last bit, is slot jammers. And these has sort of become a little bit of they're a little bit of snake oil and a little bit of magical hot sauce all in one. Who's used a slot jammer before? Anyone? Really? Okay. Google slot jammers. They are probably the most interesting thing you get to deal with, and it's a device that's EMF and or EMP based technology. So either it creates really noisy EMF jamming, or it actually generates a magnetical pulse. And it depends on who and how and where you buy these things from. They have several dozen illegal purposes that people have decided to use these things for. But from a research perspective, there's some really slick stuff you can do with them. One is if you actually buy an EMP, I can trigger MOSFETs to open. Like if I use them in a relay kind of implementation, I can trick magnetical doors to open. I can trick car doors to open. I can trick a whole bunch of stuff to open. Or if I change my frequency, I can wipe out just the NFC portion of my credit card, but leave my stripe and my old chip intact. There are literally 1,001 uses for these little cheap devices. And what's weird about them is that people, they've been around forever. I don't know why they become, I guess, more popular online than late. But for experimentation, they're honestly my favorite little device to take around, muck around with. And for killing NFCs, I haven't found something that's dialed in better as of yet. All right. Last but not least, really look at that cell phone and the attack profile, the exploit profiles we have on the phones nowadays. That's, quote, the weapon of the future. There you go, sensational. But when I look at how my NFC is going to be attacked, it's going to be somebody's fuck up in the phone that's going to cause me a bad day. The implementations, we're going to get better at. Again, I'm not paranoid anymore about somebody inducting from 10 meters away. We're working on the quality issues about snarfing from 10 meters away, from listening. But as we're sitting right now, it looks like it's a 2-meter thing. It's not going to be a 10, unless somebody's got somebody's sitting in the Faraday cage. And last but not least, like I said, there's tons of different papers in there. I'm going to make the slides available. The actual circuit designs, we've cleaned up a circuit design for the Tastic RFID Tastic Thief, and you can actually print those here in Winnipeg. And last but not least, just wanted to say thank you very much, and thanks for coming out. Perfect. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Things like the Brock's card scenario, could you just harvest by making a dummy faceplate, like the way people would capture old ATM cards in machines?
Yes.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sorry. So can I make a dummy faceplate on whatever device?
To hold it up for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, where am I here? Yeah, can I have somebody fake, hold it up for me and get access? The short answer is yes. The interesting issue is the padding. So I think of credit cards, like my little Touch Me here. Can you fool people into clicking on it? Using it? Yes, you can. Look at a credit card, though. If the CVV, again, oversimplifying things, gets chirped out as a one-time pad. If the one-time pad is out of order, it doesn't work. So if you have your fake reader beside a real reader, first time you get it, you get the pad, great. They'll do it again, they get the pad. Your pad is useless, right? So it's not impossible, it's a little bit tougher. Really, you want to be in line, or you want to be away from that device, so you'll have enough, and that's why our NFC proxy works so well, is you're grabbing it from somebody's wallet who's not intending to use a payment in the next couple of minutes, and you're transferring it to somebody who's ready to make a transaction and beat that timeliness issue. And that's really the core issue with doing the dummy-based thing. So again, way better than RFID, but still has some issues. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you very much. See you soon.